Step away from that vessel right now and put your hands up.
I'm sorry? This is my boat and I was just unlocking it.
The marina reported a trespasser matching your description. Don't move.
I am Commander Marcus Reed, an active duty naval officer. Here's my ID.
I don't care what fake ID you have, you're going in cuffs.
The high-definition lens of the body camera captured every second of a confrontation that would eventually cost the city millions and dominate national headlines. What you just witnessed wasn't a standard investigation. It was a catastrophic failure of judgment captured in 4K resolution. As the sun began to set over the Harbor Point Marina, the officer behind that lens had absolutely no idea that the man he was treating like a common criminal was actually one of the nation's elite military leaders. Commander Marcus Reed didn't panic. He didn't shout. He stood his ground with the disciplined composure of a man who has commanded billion-dollar naval assets and led hundreds of sailors through high-stakes operations. While the officer saw a suspect who didn't belong at an exclusive dock, the reality was far different. Commander Reed is a Distinguished Service Medal recipient, a graduate of the Naval War College, and a 22-year veteran with multiple overseas deployments under his belt. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. It was a professional execution of bias that would lead to a landmark $4.2 million settlement and the absolute destruction of a police officer's career. Before we dive deeper into the specific evidence that broke this case wide open, I need you to do something for me right now. Drop a comment below with the word justice if you think body cameras should be mandatory for every single private security and police interaction. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We uncover the most intense and shocking accountability stories that the mainstream media often overlooks. You don't want to miss what happens when the chief of police realizes who they actually have in cuffs. Commander Marcus Reed was never a man who expected special treatment because of the gold Oakleys on his shoulders. At 45 years old, Reed had spent more than half of his life in service to the United States Navy. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Chicago, earning a scholarship to Annapolis, where he excelled in engineering and strategic maritime law. By the time he reached the rank of commander, he had successfully overseen the logistics of an entire carrier strike group and was widely considered a rising star destined for the Pentagon. His list of achievements is staggering. Reed spent 6 years as a lead tactics instructor at the Surface Warfare Officer School. He was awarded the Bronze Star for his actions during a high-seas rescue operation in the Gulf of Aden, and he held 3 separate Navy Commendation Medals for meritorious service. Beyond the uniform, Reed was known in his community as a quiet, humble neighbor. He spent his weekend volunteering with youth sailing programs, teaching inner-city kids the basics of navigation and discipline. His reputation was impeccable, an officer and a gentleman in the truest sense of the phrase. Colleagues described him as the kind of leader who remained the calmest person in the room during a crisis. He was a man of procedure, a man of law, and a man who understood the weight of authority. That Saturday afternoon started like any other. After a grueling 6-month deployment, Reed was looking forward to a quiet evening on his boat, the Seize the Day. He had worked for 15 years to save for that 45-foot sailing yacht, viewing it not just as a luxury, but as a sanctuary. He pulled into the marina parking lot in his vintage restored SUV, wearing his favorite linen shirt, carrying nothing but a bag of groceries and his boat keys. He was just a man heading to his own property, completely unaware that his life of service was about to collide with a system that saw him as a threat before it saw him as a citizen. The Harbor Point Marina is a fortress of wealth. Located on a pristine stretch of the Atlantic coast, the docks are guarded by electronic keycard gates, roaming private security, and a culture of extreme exclusivity. On this particular Saturday, the temperature sat at a perfect 75 degrees. The air smelled of salt and expensive mahogany. Commander Reed walked down Pier C, nodding politely to a few other boat owners who were washing their decks. He reached his yacht, seized the day, and set his groceries down on a teak bench. As he fumbled with the heavy brass padlock on the cabin door, he didn't hear the heavy footfalls on the concrete walkway behind him. Enter Officer Miller. 42 years old, 12 years on the force, and a disciplinary jacket that was already beginning to bulge with unprofessional conduct complaints. Miller had been patrolling the perimeter of the marina when he received a call from a private security guard who claimed a suspicious individual had hopped the fence, in accusation that was factually impossible given that Reed had used his biometric scanner at the main gate. Officer Miller's reasoning process was flawed from the second he stepped out of his cruiser. He didn't see the yacht's registry. He didn't see the high-end groceries or the expensive watch on Reed's wrist. He saw a black man at a multi-million-dollar dock, and his mind immediately skipped past investigation and landed on apprehension. He approached with his hand already resting on his Glock 17, his chest puffed out, fueled by a cocktail of adrenaline and unearned suspicion. He didn't ask for a permit. He didn't ask for a name. He simply viewed Reed's presence as an inherent crime. The first verbal contact was sharp and jagged. Miller didn't announce his presence with a "good afternoon." Instead, he barked a command that set the stage for the legal nightmare that followed. Reed, hearing the aggression in the voice, slowly turned around. He didn't drop his keys. He didn't reach for his pockets. He simply looked at the officer with the measured gaze of a man who had faced down actual pirates. The initial exchange was the spark that would eventually burn down Miller's career. "Officer Millen, step away from that vessel right now and put your hands up." "Victim, I'm sorry. This is my boat and I was just unlocking it." Officer Miller didn't pause to process the information. He stepped closer, invading Reed's personal space, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. "Oh, Hortity, the marina reported a trespasser matching your description. Don't move." Reed remained perfectly still. He knew the law. He knew that under Terry VVA, Ohio, an officer needs reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed. Simply standing at a boat isn't a crime. "Victim, I am Commander Marcus Reed, an active duty naval officer. Here's my ID." Reed reached slowly toward his lanyard, which held his military credentials. But Miller didn't want to see them. He saw the movement as a challenge to his authority, a refusal to submit to his narrative. A haughty, "I don't care what fake ID you have, you're going in cuffs." The officer's psychology was now on full display. He had committed to the trespasser narrative, and to back down now would mean admitting he was wrong. In Miller's mind, a trespasser wouldn't have military ID, therefore, the ID must be a forgery. It was a classic case of doubling down to save face, a trap that many poorly trained officers fall into when their ego takes the wheel. "Victim, check the registry, Officer Miller. You are making a massive career mistake." Reed's voice was like ice. He wasn't pleading. He was giving a direct warning. He was citing the specific procedural failure as it happened. By this time, 2 other boat owners had stopped their work and pulled out their phones. The blue wall was being watched by civilian eyes. "Authority, you're done talking. Turn around before I force you to the ground." "Victimo, one Thai man is recording this entire interaction. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Reed pointed to a small, discreet lens on his shirt, a personal security device he often wore while traveling. This sent Miller into a visible tailspin. He reached for Reed's arm, attempting a compliance hold that was entirely unnecessary given that the commander hadn't resisted. "Authority, you think you're smart? You think those stripes mean anything here? You're a suspect, nothing more." "Bixtema, officer, you are currently violating the 4th Amendment. You have no probable cause for an arrest, and you have ignored my identification as a federal officer." "Authority, I'll be the judge of what's legal." "Hands behind your back now." Have you ever been in a situation where someone in power refused to listen to the facts? Type yes or no in the comments right now. The tension on the dock was vibrating. Reed knew that if he resisted physically, Miller would likely use force, perhaps even deadly force. He chose the path of the ultimate legal warrior. Total compliance and total documentation. He allowed his wrist to be grabbed, but he continued to speak for the record. "Victim, I am complying with your orders. I am not resisting." Note the time, 16:22. "You have refused to verify my ownership of Seize the Day despite the registration being 3 feet away from you." "Authority, shut up. You go into the station. We'll see how commander you feel in a holding cell." "Victim, I want a supervisor on the scene. I am exercising my right to a supervisor." "Authority, you don't get to call the shots." "Move." Miller shoved Reed toward the pier ramp. The commander stumbled slightly but regained his footing, his face a mask of ironclad resolve. He wasn't the one who was losing this fight. He was just waiting for the venue to change to a courtroom. The metallic click of the handcuff echoed off the white concrete of the pier. The restraints were ratcheted down tighter than necessary, biting into Reed's wrist. Officer Miller led him to the patrol cruiser, the smell of hot asphalt and exhaust fumes replacing the sea breeze. Reed was lowered into the back seat, a cramped, plastic-molded space that smelled faintly of old bleach and sweat. He sat in total silence during the 10-minute drive to the precinct, his mind already cataloging the procedural violations. When they arrived at the station, the fluorescent lights hummed with a sterile, buzzing energy. Miller marched Reed toward the booking desk, chest out, feeling victorious. He slammed Reed's military ID down on the counter in front of the booking officer, a veteran sergeant named Holloway. Officer Miller got a trespasser from the marina. Fake naval credentials, resisting, the whole 9 yards. Sergeant Holloway didn't look up at first. He picked up the ID card with a practiced, bored motion. But as his eyes swept over the holographic seal of the Department of Defense and the specific rank of commander, his posture changed instantly. He looked at the card, then at Reed, then back at the card. Sergeant Holloway, Miller, where did you get this? Officer Miller, it's a high-quality fake, obviously. Holloway stood up, his face pale. He swiped the card through the federal database reader. A second later, Reed's full service record, security clearance level, and active duty status flashed across the screen in bright green text. Sergeant Holloway, Miller, get these cuffs off him, right now. Officer Miller, Sarge, what? It's a fake. Sergeant Holloway, it's not a fake, you idiot. This is an active duty commander. Get them off. The room went silent. The other officers in the booking area stopped what they were doing. The shift in power was physical. Miller's hand shook as he fumbled for his key. The trespasser was now the highest-ranking person in the building. Within 3 minutes, the watch commander, Captain Sterling, was running down the hallway, still buttoning his uniform shirt. Captain Sterling, Commander Reed, I am so incredibly sorry. This is a massive misunderstanding. Victim, it wasn't a misunderstanding, Captain. It was a series of cautious choices made by your officer despite clear evidence of my identity. Captain Stern, we're going to fix this. Miller, get out of here. Go to the break room and don't move. Commander, please, come into my office. Vistinum, I'll stay right here until my lawyer arrives. I want every frame of that body cam footage preserved. Do not touch that server. Reed didn't raise his voice, but the authority in it made the captain flinch. Emergency calls were already being placed to the mayor's office and the city attorney. They knew. They all knew the city was about to be sued into the ground. Do you think Officer Miller should have been fired on the spot? Let me know in the comments below. Commander Reed walked out of the precinct 2 hours later, but he didn't go home to rest. By 8 p.m. that evening, he had already placed calls to a top-tier civil rights attorney and the regional director of the ACLU. The following Monday, a 142-page federal lawsuit was filed in district court. The allegations were damning: Fourth Amendment violations, false arrest, battery, and a specific claim of racial profiling supported by Miller's own recorded statements. The media coverage was a tidal wave. By Tuesday morning, the 15-second clip from Reed's personal body camera had racked up 5 million views on Twitter. By Wednesday, it was 15 million. The Seize the Day incident became the lead story on every major network. The public outrage was fueled by the sheer contrast between Reed's distinguished service and the demeaning treatment he received on that dock. Internal Affairs launched an investigation that lasted 6 weeks. They didn't just look at that day, they looked at Miller's entire 12-year career. What they found was a disturbing statistical pattern. Over the last 3 years, 84% of Miller's suspicious person stops involved Black or Hispanic men, despite the precinct's demographics being majority white. Of those stops, only 2% resulted in an actual arrest for a crime. The rest were investigative detentions that led nowhere. The investigation findings were a nightmare for the department. Miller had routinely ignored exculpatory evidence, falsified reasonable suspicion in his reports, and had been coached 3 separate times on his aggressive tone. The chief of police tried to offer a private apology and a $50,000 settlement to keep the case out of the headlines. Reed's response was a single-sentence letter from his attorney. We look forward to seeing the city in discovery. The fallout was swift and total. Officer Miller was officially terminated from the force following a hearing that cited 16 separate policy violations, including conduct unbecoming an officer and dishonesty in official reporting. He attempted to appeal the decision through the police union, but the body cam footage was so irrefutable that even the union eventually withdrew its support. Miller was stripped of his peace officer certification, meaning he could never work in law enforcement again in that state. But the consequences didn't stop with one officer. The Department of Justice launched a formal pattern or practice investigation into the entire city's police force. A year later, a federal report concluded that the department had a systemic culture of biased policing. This led to a mandatory consent decree, a federal court order requiring 5 major reforms, mandatory de-escalation training, an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, a complete overhaul of the stop and frisk policy, the implementation of AI monitored bodycam auditing, and a transparent public database of officer disciplinary records. The lawsuit ended in a $4.2 million settlement, one of the largest in the city's history for a non-shooting incident. During the press conference, Commander Reed stood in front of a sea of microphones. He announced that after legal fees, every single penny of the settlement would be donated to create the Reed Foundation for Systemic Equity, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal resources for victims of police misconduct who don't have his rank or resources. This wasn't about the money, Reed told the cameras. This was about making the cost of bias so high that the system is forced to change. My uniform is a symbol of the law, and I will not allow someone to use a different uniform to break it. Reed returned to his duties at the Navy, but his case is now taught in law schools across the country as a masterclass in civil rights litigation. As for Miller, he ended up working private security for a warehouse a far cry from the authority he once abused. This story matters because Marcus Reed was the perfect victim. He had the credentials, he had the knowledge of the law, he had the military rank, and he had the composure of a saint. And still, despite all of those advantages, he was nearly thrown to the ground and locked in a cage for the crime of owning a boat. It forces us to ask a terrifying question. If this is how the system treats a high-ranking naval commander with the body camera, how does it treat the teenager with no resources, no recording, and no knowledge of his rights? The accountability we saw here, the termination, the $4.2 million settlement, the federal reforms, is the exception, not the rule. It only happened because the evidence was undeniable and the victim was unimpeachable. True justice shouldn't require a Distinguished Service Medal. It should be the baseline for every single person who encounters law enforcement. This case proved that while one career was rightfully ended, the work of fixing the system is only just beginning. What was your biggest takeaway from Commander Reed's story? Do you think $4.2 million was enough, or should it have been more? Make sure to share this video to spread awareness about police accountability. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into the cases that changed the world. Drop a final comment below. Should Officer Miller have faced criminal charges? Thanks for watching and stay vigilant. I'll see you in the next one.